And so, for example, an important part of your campaign will be using hashtag. Okay, so on Twitter, hashtags are, you know, hashtags are the bread and butter there. And so what hashtag did you use and why? And how did this hashtag help to convey your message? And how did it help you to promote your campaign? And also, you know, how did you come up with it? So what kind of keywords you used in there, and how did you go on about in identifying these? Again, more of these details will be in the brief. Next part will be the MailChimp framework. And so again, this will be similar to Twitter, but now you will be talking about MailChimp. And so how did you use MailChimp to promote your initiative? And so how did you create your landing page and your newsletter, and what kind of information did you include on them? Okay. Of course, you are more than welcome to kind of alter these word counts, because now I am looking at it. Actually, this MailChimp framework might need slightly more. So, for example, you can do 400 words in the MailChimp framework, and then you can do 200 words for the analysis, for example, because the analysis is just mainly going to be talking about the advantages and disadvantages of these platforms for this particular purpose. And I mean, I wouldn't say this needs to be so much in depth, you know. I don't think it's the main concern for me here. And then lastly, I thought that it would be good to incorporate some big data analysis here. And so just you can just briefly mention how the platforms are going to use the data that you will gather through your social media and through the newsletter, etc., through the landing page. And then, of course, conclusion, as every work needs some kind of ending to it, some concluding remarks. Then there will be conclusion to that as well. Okay, so that's briefly it. That's roughly what it is going to be about. I hope you can kind of get the idea of what you are going to do from this, but don't worry about it too much. There's going to be more detailed guidance, and hopefully also after today you will also get a better idea of what exactly the content should be focused on. Right, so I will start now talking about, basically I will try to now put your assignment into context via drawing on this, what has been identified as the 4 main interlocking global crises that the humanity is now towards the end of the 20th century and now in the 21st century has been facing. And so as you can see, we have identified these 4 global crises that seem to be threatening the existence of humanity on Earth. And that is, firstly, it is the existence and spread of nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction and the overall level of military expenditure. Secondly, it is the affliction with hunger and absolute poverty of some 20% of the human race, mainly in what is misleadingly called the Third World. Thirdly, it is the environmental pollution and ecosystem and species destruction at such a rate and on such a scale that the very biospheric processes of organic regeneration are under threat. And lastly, it is the intensifying human repression resulting from the increasing denial by governments of the most fundamental human rights and the inability of increasing numbers of people to develop even a small part of their human potential. So in short, we could kind of summarize these four global crises with four words, and that is the military threats, hunger and poverty, then is the ecological crisis, and also human repression, a repression of human rights by repressive or oppressive regimes. And so, again, as I said previously, I don't want you to try to solve any of these four problems, because if it was, of course, possible to do it so easily, it would have been done by now. But these are just these kind of four overarching problems that then again kind of bring with it or then involve these smaller problems that fit into this wider context of issues that we face. And you know, by taking actions on individual, collective level, on a local scale, on a smaller scale, with cooperating with people and organizations around the world, we could potentially kind of alter the direction of where we are currently heading as humanity, and we could definitely improve things in the world. And I think that's what most of us would really want. And so now my question to you goes, what do you care about in the world? And what do you want to change? What are in your opinion, the pressing issues that we face today? And what is it that really bothers you about the world as a conscious individual that thinks about things in your environment, that cares about others, that cares about the quality of our experience here, and cares about the experience, about the quality of our life. So do you have any kind of concerns or any convictions that you would want to address potentially also with this assignment? Is there anything that you feel very strongly about in the world and that you would like to advocate for it? Is it, for example, being vegan? Do you want to help the environment? Do you want to stop global warming? Do you want to stop suffering of the animals in the slaughterhouses? Do you want to fight for women's rights? Do you think that women need still more and more support? Do you really care about the wars, for example? Are there any concerns that you would like to address? There sure must be many, but which one of them would you think you care about the most? Okay, so Zach says, I've been wanting to volunteer recently, either at a food bank or homeless shelter recently. Okay, that's very nice. So basically you are concerned about individuals, about the inequality, about poverty, about hunger. So that really bothers you, the fact that we live in the UK, one of the most developed countries in the world, and we have still people who are homeless here, who don't have anything to eat. Yes, so this is something that bothers you. I agree. Could we do something around mental health, Libby? Of course you could, definitely. Megan says helping out small businesses. Okay, So again, kind of like ensuring that, you know, people have livelihoods, that they have kind of some security, and they can make their living. And Anaya says things like dogs at rescue centers. Okay, that's very nice. And Sophie, I would say both environmental preservation and women genders equality. Okay, that's very nice. That's probably also something that I could identify with. And Rita says sexism, racism, pollution, food waste, poverty, animal cruelty. Yes, I absolutely agree. All of those things. But yeah, for this campaign, for this assignment, you will just need to pick one thing, okay, and one particular issue that you would like to address with your campaign, and just change and change it. But it must be very, very small problem that you really think that if you were to kind of now take your campaign that you will have created by the end of the semester and kind of implement it in the real world, it will have the chance to kind of do its job, okay? So it has to be realistic, even though we are not going to run it. But, you know, by the end of this semester, you might have materials and you might have so much knowledge that actually maybe during the summer you will want to actually run this campaign. So if you were to do that, it would have to be kind of realistic, and it would have to be plausible, it would have to be feasible with your means, with your current you know, with your current resources, etc. So yes, this is something for you to think about by next week. So you need to think about a problem that you want to address, okay? So let me give you an example. So Anaya says things like dogs at rescue centers. Okay, so now I'm going to make something up. There is a dog rescue center in Malvern, for example, and I don't know, they don't have enough food for the dogs. Okay, so now I am going to address this problem, that this dog rescue center doesn't have enough dog food. So the aim of my campaign, my initiative would be to address this problem through social media, newsletter, landing page, and to kind of make sure that I would get people donate food or donate money or whatever. I would do a fundraiser, or I would just ask people to buy dogs food and bring it to me. And so through this social media and all these other materials that you need to create, I would try to collect as much dogs food as I could and then deliver it to the rescue center. As simple as that. Okay? So something like that. Or if I say environmental preservation, as I said, you want to clean up an area of your forest. Okay, so I gather people, or I kind of address this issue. I go take pictures of the forest where the waste is. You know, I create messaging around it. I create this communication strategy. So how I'm going to address it, but we are going to talk about this in a minute. And I will try to get as many volunteers, as many people from the area as possible to come to gather at a certain time on a certain day, and that we will to clean the area of that forest together, for example. Okay, so is this something that you have done before? Have you ever done something like this? Or have you participated in any kind of initiative like this? A little. What did you do, Tori, if I may ask? You collected food and clothes for migrants last year. Wow, that's great. And Tori was fostering kittens. Amazing. And did you guys kind of participate in the executive part of it, or did you manage to do social media or something like that? Or were you aware also that some of the people who you worked with, that there was a social media kind of campaign or promotion included in this? And you collected food for food banks. Wow, that's nice. You just saw about the social media. So someone organized this and then you kind of reacted to the appeal, to the call. So someone else created. Okay. Right. Well, so that can be as your inspiration, perhaps. I don't know in what form exactly they did it, their social media strategy, but yes, that could be like an inspiration for you. Okay, great. Well, okay, I hope, are you happy with this? Any questions here? So I will move on to the next slide if everyone is happy, but if you are, if you have any questions, please do feel free to message at any time. So, and as I said, I'm going to give you some context to this. And so what we are basically going to do here, and you might have heard of this or you might have not, or maybe it seems pretty self-explanatory to you to say the term, the expression public advocacy. But yes, how we are going to go on to, or what do you call these kind of activities that we just that I am kind of aiming you to do, is public advocacy. Now, public advocacy can be defined as a set of deliberate actions designed to influence public policies or public attitudes in order to empower the marginalized. Okay. Now, just to note this, your campaign doesn't necessarily need to be aimed at changing public policies or changing legislation. It might as well be, but it doesn't have to, okay? So again, it might be something like fostering kittens or collecting food for food banks. I am just going to talk about public advocacy nevertheless, because it is for me a very interesting and fascinating subject, and it is something that I think raising awareness about basically our ability as citizens and as individuals to change things in society via, you know, just knowing how is very important and it's crucial, especially at these times when we are faced with some huge issues, and when we actually have more tools than ever to be able to kind of leverage our potential as citizens in democracies. So that's why I want to address public advocacy, and that's why I want to talk about this today a little bit. And public advocacy in liberal democracies uses the instruments of democracy and adopts nonviolent and constitutional means. And so public advocacy is a set of deliberate actions which are strategically designed, okay? So it's a set of strategic deliberate actions to go on about influencing public opinion towards on certain issues, and then exerting kind of pressure on the government and the lawmakers to change this in the liking of the public, or towards the better, towards the greater good. Now, public advocacy generally consists or involves from these elements, okay? So, or it is comprised of these elements. So it is resisting unequal power relations, such as patriarchy, okay, at every level, from the personal to public, from family to governance. Okay, so resisting unequal power relations, that is something that public advocacy tends to address generally. Engaging institutions of governance to empower the marginalized. So again, the focus here is on the groups, on the marginalized groups or those who need help. And so therefore exerting pressure and working with institutions who have the power and the influence to change policies in favor or to make them more favorable or empowering for the marginalized groups in society. Public advocacy is creating and using spaces within the system in order to change it. Okay, so it kind of takes, it kind of makes use of these vacuous places, spaces in the system where change can be implemented, okay, or it creates new spaces for people who need it. In terms of, it will create new legislation, it will create new institutions, it will create new ways of doing things, okay, and it will aim to do so via appealing to the institutions of governance. Strategizing the use of knowledge, skills, and opportunities to influence public policies. So yes, public advocacy involves using the use of knowledge, skills, opportunities, and information to influence public policies. So they will utilize strategies to disseminate knowledge and to persuade publics in order to influence these policies. And public advocacy also involves bridging micro-level activism and macro-level policy initiatives. Okay, so this is what we are essentially, again, going to try to do. We are going to do some kind of micro-level activism on our local, regional level. Okay, so with whatever tools we have available. And with this, we always aim to kind of span a wider change in the macro level policy initiatives. Okay, so for example, again, if I'm going to run workshops for women on empowering women and teaching them new skills, essentially what I can do with this is to take it a step further and then expand on this initiative from my local level, implement more other local and regional institutions that would do the same, and eventually I could move towards the macro level policy initiative, and I could influence it, and I could implement, and I could advocate for the implementation of new ways of educating women in society, etc. So that's that. And public advocacy really is kind of, so to kind of summarize it, it is a form of social action. And so it, as a form of social action, the nature and character of public advocacy is shaped by also political culture that we have in our society, the social systems that are prevalent, and constitutional framework in the country within which they are practiced as well. So this is important to bear in mind. And public advocacy is also shaped, or public or people-centered advocacy. These two I could use interchangeably today. Public advocacy and people-centered advocacy. We don't need to kind of go into details what the differences between these two are. They are influenced in the ways in which decision-making and public policies are influenced by public interest or social action groups in different contexts. And so public advocacy is also perceived as a value-driven political process because it seeks to question and change existing unequal power relations in favor of those who are socially, economically, or politically marginalized or disadvantaged. Okay, that's that. So moving on to the next slide, I would just say that, so I will talk about some of the sources of power in public advocacy here. And so in a liberal democratic framework, public policies play a vital role in determining the directions of social justice and political and civil liberties and the long-term interests of the environment and the general public. And the primary focus of public advocacy is then to influence policy formulation, change, and implementation, as I have already mentioned. And so in order to influence public policies, it is necessary to influence the prevailing power relations in favor of the marginalized. And then some of the, and of course, influencing power relations is a complex process and which involves a lot of confrontation and negotiation among different interests. Okay, so shifting really these power relations is a very, it's a big effort, but it can be done with strategic actions. And to do this effectively, it really depends on having other sources of power here. So as we talked previously about the power and counterpower in society, I would say that perhaps the sources of power in public advocacy would be the counterpower to the general status quo here, which actually creates these unequal conditions for being in society. And so in the context of public advocacy, we can identify six major sources of power. And so this would be the power of people or citizens mobilization. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Whenever people mobilize in protests, in demonstrations, this of course exerts certain power, certain counterpower on the authorities, and this of course has been proven has potential to change things. Okay, so our history is written in revolutions and demonstrations and movements. Next source of power would be the power of information and knowledge. And of course, without being informed and without having the access to knowledge and information, we wouldn't really be able to make decisions that could lead towards empowering us, towards bettering our condition. Okay, so in order to be able to change things, we need to know the workings of the system. We need to know what is good and what is bad for us. So just as much we have information, the scientific data on the climate change, we can now act on it. Without this information and this knowledge, we wouldn't be able to recognize the threats that we are faced with, and we wouldn't be able to take the actions necessary in order to kind of to address this and to challenge it and to change the course of where we are heading currently. The power of constitutional guarantees. So this would be the rights to protest, to peaceful assembly, the rights to free speech, again, etc. So these all give power to citizens. That is crucial in public advocacy. The power of direct grassroots experience and linkages. Okay, so grassroots are very important in public advocacy. Okay, so every advocacy campaign needs to be grounded in grassroots experience. Okay, so what is grassroots experience? It means that you need to connect very closely with the reality of the people who are affected by certain problems. Okay, so it would be very difficult for me to kind of start a campaign from here, to campaign for Africa, to campaign to give water to Africa, or to end poverty in Kenya, or etc., whatever. Okay, because I am not connected to the grassroots there. Okay, so I would be very kind of, my campaign could result in being very, with having very little impact, because I don't have the means here that I could, that the grassroots experience and linkages could provide me with. So I am not going to have the credibility, and I'm not going to have the knowledge that they have, and I'm not going to have, you know, I'm not going to be able to be as convincing, and to say the least. The power of networking, alliances, and solidarity. Again, so this kind of related to the first point, of power of people or citizens mobilization. So again, we need to establish networking, alliances, and solidarity with other people. And you know, whenever there is solidarity and kind of cooperation, of course, this again creates a lot of potential for social change, and or for other political change. And of course, lastly, but not least, we have the power of moral convictions. And then this rests on the assumption that human beings would act, you know, in accord with their moral convictions and with ethics, and that they would necessarily choose the good over the bad. So they would choose the good over the evil in society, and you know, they wouldn't try to perpetuate evil, but instead they would act in a way that can provide good for everyone. So really, I would say that as much as all these are very important, I would say the first one, the power of people and citizens mobilization, would be the most crucial here, because advocacy without mobilization is unlikely to achieve much. And that's it. So what we are also going to kind of, or what you should try to address in your assignment, is to how you manage to gather a number of people, how you manage to mobilize people to kind of to advance your case, to advance your cause. Now, grassroots movements, as I mentioned, are very important, are of central importance in any public advocacy campaign. And for example, Kelly, who was a German female ecological feminist activist, she identified kind of 4 courses of action on how people or how public advocacy can actually kind of reverse these power relations in society, how we can counter the issues that we currently face in society. And so she identified that this would be through 4 types of actions. So it would be legitimate actions, such as including readers' letters, signing petitions, distributing leaflets, demonstrating and knocking on doors. Okay, so this is what is what is called legitimate action, and is actually our constitutional it's our constitutional guarantee. Symbolic action then would be vigils, silent marches, fasts, as well as more light-hearted events. So this would be symbolic action, okay? Non-cooperation then would be striking, boycotting events, conscientious objection and non-acceptance of state honors, okay? So this would be kind of the refusal of certain practices in society which we deem as unreasonable or unethical or harmful. So that is for non-cooperation, or that is for the refusal or rejection, non-participation, non-compliance. And then lastly, if all the other three don't work, we need to resort to civil disobedience, which is the open infringement of the law on grounds of conscience. And this would then be protests and demonstrations and causing certain disruptions to the system as to, you know, we are here, notice us, we are unhappy and we want to change things. So this would be kind of the 4 types of actions that grassroots movements and any public advocacy campaigns would do in order to promote their cause, to advance their cause. Now, are there any questions on this? Also, I just want to mention, good. I just want to mention that I have uploaded materials. I think I have linked 3 texts to week 7 in our reading list, and these are all the sources that I have used to kind of make this presentation for you, and they are very, very informative for you. So if you are kind of struggling to kind of maybe grasp what I'm telling you right now, do have a look at them. They are very, very, you know, very informative and very much on point, these 3 texts. So if you ever struggle to, or if you want to remind yourself, it's all there. So there are three sources there. There is one book which is mainly focused on development, or it actually talks about the global issues from development perspective. Then there is a public advocacy kind of guide on how to create a campaign, public advocacy campaign. And then there is a case study of how public advocacy, how they did public advocacy in India and like the perspective of India, but there is a lot of generic material there on public advocacy, and they also talk a lot about communication and how to communicate in public advocacy campaign, which is actually something that is very important for us, because as you will see in a minute, I'm going to tell you basically, well, you will see. So firstly, I want to address the elements of a public advocacy campaign. And just to make a note, these are not all the elements of public advocacy campaign. And there are many things that you need to do in a public advocacy campaign. But what I want to highlight here is that while it will be very useful for you to follow these, at least these 7 steps here that I have picked, the 7 elements, because of course, without, you know, kind of knowing or without identifying these or elaborating on them, you wouldn't be able to put together your material. So you kind of need to at least have in mind like how you would go on about doing things if you were really to kind of run a proper public advocacy campaign. But what we are going to do in the public advocacy campaign is actually we are going to focus on this point here, prepare to communicate effectively. So we are going to address the communication aspect of public advocacy campaigns. So we are going to focus on the communication part of it. But yes, so every public advocacy campaign needs to have needs some kind of structure, some plan, and consists of things that you need to consider when you are doing public advocacy campaign, and when you want your public advocacy campaign to succeed, and when you want it to be effective. Okay. And so the best way that you begin your advocacy campaign is to do your research. Okay. So you will need to be certain that a policy change, for example, or whatever you are proposing is the best way to solve the problem. And you will also need to know the latest science and evidence in support of your issue. Okay. Now, again, if you are going to talk about the dog's shelter and that you want to gather food for the dog's shelter, for example, I mean, you don't need that much science, but as you will see later, there is always some elements where you should incorporate data and evidence in your campaign, which makes it just more convincing, etc. But it depends on the particular problem that you are choosing. So whether it is a scientific problem or whether it is something different, but always to have background information on this is generally is crucial, of course. And you can also research any past advocacy efforts on the same issue, so you know, of course, what worked and what didn't. Also, you will need to set clear policy objectives or set clear objectives, okay? And so any campaign or any really strategic activity needs to start with clear objectives, and these need to be the SMART objectives. Does anyone know what the SMART acronym means? The SMART objectives. What do these letters stand for? Okay, so first is specific. Okay, so we have S for specific. We have M, A, R, E. So specific objectives, what would be M? It has to do something with how you can actually evaluate whether you have achieved it or not. So it helps you kind of be able to evaluate how successful your campaign was in the end. Anyone? No, they are adjectives. They are adjectives that describe the objectives, how the objectives should be. Okay? Yeah. So what your objectives should be. So they should be specific, okay? So not vague, like I want to establish world peace. Well, you know, there are so many things that you can do to actually contribute to establishing world peace that, you know, you wouldn't be able, this wouldn't be plausible as an objective. So it needs to be specific, okay? So achievable, relevant, yes, achievable, relevant. So we have specific, and what is M? So how would you evaluate? How would you make sure that you can evaluate what you have done? What is the other thing for evaluate? What is the other word? Sorry. Measure. Yeah. So measurable. Okay. So specific, measurable. And then we have achievable. I'm just typing it in the chat. Achievable, relevant, and last one, T stands for time. So for time bound. Yeah, great. Time bound. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. Right? So let's say again, let's look at the example for the dogs shelter. Okay, so our initiative, our activity is going to be, our campaign is going to be about collecting food for dogs, collecting dog foods for this Malvern dog shelter. So objective, specific objective would be collecting dogs food for Malvern's dog shelter. Now, how do we make it measurable? Well, I will say we need to collect, I don't know, around from anywhere from 20 to 30 kilograms of dog's food. Okay, so this could be measurable, for example, right? Achievable, well, can we achieve it or can we not achieve it? Can we achieve it given, our resources? Can we actually get 20 kilograms of dog's food or can we not? Do you think it's plausible with my resources, with the resources that I have in terms of money, time, people, etc.? Is it relevant? Is it really needed in this area? If I wanted to, for example, campaign here for, I don't know, abolishing the honor or tightening the honor killing laws in the Middle East, well, that wouldn't be really relevant here, right? And time bound. Is it plausible to do this within a specific time? And then I need to set a time as well, because otherwise I'm never going to be able to actually conclude, was I successful or was I not? Because if I say, I just want to collect it, then maybe I will collect 5 kilos in 2 months and then 3 kilos in another 2 months. And it can go on forever. And then actually I will never fully kind of accomplish the mission, the objectives that I have given myself. So collecting food for Malvern's, I'm just gonna write this in the chat, Malvern's food dogs shelter. Measurable would be 20 to 30 kilos. Okay, achievable. Think about your resources. Okay, it's time, money, how many people are involved. Okay, so is it plausible really? Is the scope of your project really appropriate for you? Relevant. So is the problem relevant to your environment, to your location, etc.? So is it something that will kind of advance the will help your community? And lastly, it was time bound. Set yourself timeline and a deadline. Okay, so e.g. 3 weeks, right? Something like this. Okay, so that was about the policy objectives. Now, build strong partnerships. Again, as I said, working in a coalition or a partnership with others, it's a good way, or the best way to really demonstrate support for your issue. So if you identify a core group of organizations or individuals which then work together to drive the campaign forward on a day-to-day basis, this can be very beneficial for advancing your cause. So you need to here identify a range of all the new allies that are willing to speak out in favor of your objectives, okay? And here you can turn to civil society, professional or business groups from sectors that are related to your campaign, for example. Also, you need to know the political landscape if you are actually aiming to change policies, okay? And so understanding the policy-making process and which decision makers and influencers to target is key to achieving your objectives, really. So you need to know the positions of the decision makers on the policy change objectives, and you also need to identify any opposition that you might encounter, okay? Develop your key strategies, of course. This means that this is related to how you are actually going to persuade decision makers, okay? So these are the strategies that you need to have in mind and through which you will want to achieve a shift in policy or in which you want to achieve or bring about a solution to your problem. And so there are many ways this can be done, but most successful campaigns employ some combination of, direct interactions with decision making, and then of course it will be using media and social media to influence decision makers, and then grassroots mobilization to engage a strong base of supporters. And then, as I said, our main focus of this campaign is going to be for you to create this social media strategy that is going to be a wider part of this public advocacy campaign. So just to stress this, your public advocacy campaign is going to be mainly imagined, okay? You can have a draft of it, or you can have a rough plan, but what you are going to create here is you are going to be basically like a communications specialist. You're going to be the communications coordinator or social media coordinator, or what you want in a particular campaign here, okay? So you are going to be creating the communications strategy using social media and web-based applications for this cause, okay? So just imagine that someone else comes with the idea, and then you are just going to do the communication strategy. I hope that I'm making this clear. If I don't, please, tell me. And of course, to communicate effectively, and really, that is what I am going to try to kind of to show you, and to stress how you can communicate effectively in order to make your campaign successful. And so this will include, and actually I'm going to talk about this in the latter slides. So I'm not going to go into too much details here. And then, of course, the last step would be run your campaign, right? So that's that. Let me just check where we are in terms of the progress here. Yeah, okay. So just the next slide, it's just an informative, something informative for you. So this is basically how you can actually, how a campaign should look like in terms of its structure, its organization. So vision here, so everything starts with vision, and vision is like the largest kind of largest wheel here, okay, that um, that really empowers all the other parts of it. So vision, strategy, tactics, and outcome is the last step. So it all starts from vision, goes to strategy, then broken down to specific tactics, and again, certain elements here. So now, well, I would say let's take a quick break. We are going to, of course, finish a bit earlier today because I will give you a task which you will need to start today. So you will actually need to set up your accounts for Twitter and MailChimp. So I would say let's take a quick break of 10:27. Let's take 13 minutes break, so until 10:40. Is that okay? Right. Okay, guys. So let's see you at 10:40, and then I'm just gonna focus more on the communication part of your campaign, and then I'm going to let you off, right? So see you in a bit. All right, so is everyone back? So can we continue? We have Thomas, Georgina, Maria, Zach, Emma. Is everyone else back? You can give me also feedback if you are here. You can go on happy or sad or whatever you're feeling like. You can give me feedback through the button at the bottom of the screen next to the microphone button. Excuse me. Right. Okay, guys. So now I'm going to talk to you about using social media as a part of your advocacy campaign, so as an advocacy strategy. And so what I'm going to focus on is basically how to use social media and what to kind of include in your social media posts, in your newsletters. So what you should focus on when working with social media and with applications to promote your campaign. So I'm going to outline some best practices, and I'm going to aim to give you some advice on how you can create the best social media strategy for your public advocacy campaign. So why is it generally beneficial to use social media in public advocacy campaigns, so as part of an overall strategy? Is because, of course, we know that social media are interactive and they create attention and generate dialogue, and this is important when we want to engage publics, when we want to talk to publics, and when we want to kind of make an impact, okay? And so some of the means, one of the means of social media is also, or one of the means through which we can, you know, persuade and convince our audiences about our cause is the opportunity that social media gives us, and that is that it allows us to pitch compelling ideas and stories. Okay. So for example, storytelling is quite important, or is quite beneficial, using storytelling for as a social media strategy. But it doesn't necessarily have to be only storytelling, but so ideas or things that you could include in your social media include events. So you can aim to kind of promote certain events in your social media posts, etc. Data reports and easy to understand statistics. So these are beneficial to include. Visuals, of course, images. Okay, these are particularly impactful. As we know, an image says 1,000 words. Sharp sound bites. So this means that you can use quotes that would convey your main messages. Okay, so quotes from someone influential, from someone well known. This can make a particularly good impact on your audiences. And also you can include testimonials of people who have been affected by your issue, for example. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can consider in including in your posts. So think about this. Next thing, I want to just make a note that social media and public advocacy, the use of social media in public advocacy campaigns, well, as we have previously perhaps addressed, We know that there is a lot of political content going about social media, and we have mentioned previously the hashtag activism, which is a form of digital activism is um, that is done on social media. But also with the hashtag activism, we know that there is something called as slacktivism, and of course many people are quite skeptic about hashtag activism and about social media activism, and therefore it is important to stress that social media activism can never fully replace traditional protest or traditional means of influencing public opinions. So social media really is just an aid in this kind of overarching strategy of our public advocacy campaign. So you should never rely only on social media when you want to advance certain cause. If you kind of if you're thinking about doing public advocacy on your own initiative in the future, social media can never really replace other traditional means of exerting pressure. It's really just complementing mostly other means, other tools. Because what social media essentially has done is that it has provided opportunity to reach audiences, to reach more publics, to reach people who think alike, and it can also amplify our voice. So we should think about it as an amplifier, really, or giving us the voice. Okay, now how do we actually ensure that we can communicate effectively? So really, in order to for your advocacy campaign to prove successful, so whether this would be direct interaction with decision makers or whatever you want, mobilization tactics, and other forms or other tactics, everything really comes down to all your efforts in your campaign would come down to effective communication. And so what you will do for this assignment in particular is that you are going to use these digital tools to convey strategic messages and communications, and make sure that you develop such a plan for the communications strategy that they can be as persuasive as possible. And so you will need to think about this in advance of your campaign. And the most important principle of effective communication is to know your audience. And so depending on your chosen strategies, apart from the communication strategy, which are, as we said, imagined, your audiences may range from, you can target decision makers, or you can target journalists, or community members, okay? This you will need to specify in your analytical portfolio, so who your audience was as well. But I'm going to come up with the brief, so don't worry about that. And so these groups, of course, these groups of people will each have a different communication needs. And so the materials and messages that work for one group won't necessarily work for another. And so the more you know about your audience, the more targeted and effective your advocacy outreach will be. And of course, think about the demographics of each group as well. So if you are targeting communities, then you need to know exactly which segments of these communities you are targeting and what the demographics are, because of course this will influence their kind of perceptions of your campaign. And another thing And so once you have determined, um, once you have determined um, your audiences, you will need to gather the following information. So you need to think about how you can best reach them, okay? But of course, we know that we are not going to be able to decide whether we can use TV or radio. We are going to use social media. So here, again, your audiences need to be suitable for uh, social media, okay? So you will need to think about the audiences of social media here, and this essentially should be the audiences that you will be, the audiences, sorry, that you will be targeting. And also then you need to consider the questions or concerns and attitudes that they have about your issue and what the specific information is that they will need in order to take action. And so according to this information, you then can craft your messages accordingly and your tactics. And another thing to consider is, of course, that your audiences will probably or most likely be busy people. And so this means that what you will need to do is to develop short, simple messages to inspire them to take action. And though the specific content would also vary depending on your audience, your messages should generally include the following. So there should be a short problem statement about what you want to change and why, a few key attention grabbing facts that illustrate the problem or potential solution, a specific action that the audience can take to help, and also a human story that highlights how the issue has impacted individuals could be very beneficial. Okay, so in terms of your messages, these are the 4 points that you should consider and that you should definitely consider including in your posts. Okay, so this could make the biggest impact on your audiences. But again, your messages will depend on your audience. So, for example, here on the right, you have a snapshot, an example of a short, memorable message, for example. It could have been, well, a Twitter post. So, for example, it was a message on speeding, which targeted Kenyan pedestrians. So speed is lethal to pedestrians, and if you are hit by a vehicle traveling at 60 kilometers, only 10% will survive, 50 kilometers, only 40% will survive, and 30 kilometers, only 95% will survive, which is great. So then they used to support this evidence with a hashtag that says 30 saves kids. So this is an initiative to promote, driving 30 in pedestrian areas or in estate areas. And so tell your member of parliament we need legislation that makes traffic slow down outside of schools. Okay, so very simple post, something like this could be something to learn from, to take inspiration from. It contains short messages, but very concise, very much on point. It is supported by good, very impactful evidence, okay? And then it also has a useful hashtag. Any questions to this? Any questions about this? Right. And lastly, I'm going to talk about some good practices in social media. So just to add to the content of your message and how to make your messages impactful and as convincing as possible. Now, generally, some of the best practices in social media public advocacy campaigns. I'm going to mention some of them. So as we already said, make your content discoverable via hashtags. So this is, in all honesty, this is not a recommendation, but this is a must. Okay, so it is one of the criteria of your assignment here. You need to come up with a hashtag that will promote your campaign, and there will be a section in which you will kind of reason why did you choose this particular hashtag and how it actually relates to your message and how the hashtag works on Twitter. And we are going to have a dedicated session on this in the next couple of weeks on how hashtags work and why they are good to use. Also use vivid art and quick witted content to get attention. Okay, so graphics are important. You can choose any form of graphics, whether it be real life pictures or it will be some sort of art. Again, you need to consider, you know, who you're trying to convince and how to best relate to them and how to best craft your messages to these audiences. GIFs are particularly helpful as well if you are targeting young audiences. You can tag celebrities, individuals, or organizations with influence, for example, to jumpstart your campaign. Again, you are not going to need to ask anyone, communicate with anyone in real life. But if you actually think about someone that could potentially help to spread your message on social media, you do include them in your sorry in your campaign. Okay, so do put their name there, tag them. Add a deadline to your campaign to instill urgency. This is something that also makes impact on people. So this is something psychological. So, you know, if you just put a campaign out there and people don't really know, you know, how much time they have to take an action, you know, they might as well just be like, all right, I will do it tomorrow, next time, next week, etc. But eventually they might forget it. We know how it works. So adding a deadline, which actually will urge people and will make people more aware of, okay, well, if I really care about this cause, I need to take action as soon as I can, because in the 2 weeks, I won't be able to do that anymore. Okay, so that again encourages people to take action, to really participate. So adding a deadline could be beneficial. So something to consider for you there. Don't limit yourself to a single channel. Of course, you are not doing that. We are using 2 channels here in particular, so Twitter and MailChimp. And of course, go where your audience is. Again, this is not 100% relevant because I am kind of limiting you here to Twitter and MailChimp. So you need to also now choose audiences that you know that will use Twitter. And you can build on momentum by promoting positive impact created. So for example, if you have, for example, carried out similar actions in the past, like this one that you are going to promote now, you can actually incorporate your experiences or testimonials or whatever positive impact you have previously created into your new messages, and you can draw on this. And again, this will give you credibility. This will persuade audiences, okay, you know, I will join this person's campaign because they know what they are doing, they have some experience in it, and it's just more likely to succeed because they have created positive impact before. But do not worry if you haven't done that before. Of course, I'm not going to mark you on whether you have done it or not. Okay, these are just things that you can include in your messages to make them more convincing. And lastly, you can use popular memes to work for your campaign. Use humor, okay, if it's appropriate. You can create videos which are easily consumable. Of course, you don't have to. You are not asked to do this. It's completely up to you. I'm not going to downgrade you if you don't do it. Okay, I completely understand how videos are time consuming, extremely time consuming. So And of course, ensure sharing and posting. This would be just a general advice once again when you are running a more long-term campaign. So you need to stay engaged with your campaign and your audiences. And another particularly useful thing is that the campaign should appeal to emotions, or it is best practice if it appeals to emotions. Again, you know how much impact this creates. When I see those adverts on TV about the donkeys, for example, you know, oh my God, I always like take my phone and I donate straight away because I just feel so sorry because it's just so emotional. So, you know, draw from your own experience as well. Draw on your own experience, that's what I meant. Right, guys, are there any questions at all? Is anyone confused, or is everyone happy with what you are going to be, what you are going to do? Anaya is happy with it. Great. Okay, Sophie doesn't have questions. Right. Okay. Well, so by next week, you will need to have an idea, and I will ask you to submit your ideas to me. I will think about the form, how you can submit them. Well, I mean, either you can email me by next Tuesday. I can remind you on Friday. I will send you an email to remind you that by next Tuesday you will need to kind of describe your ideas to me via email, or yeah, I think that would be the best practice, the best way to do it. Do you agree that you would email me? And then by week 9, you can also submit a draft outline of your campaign. Okay, so what kind of things you are going to include, and what the key messages are going to be, etc. I'm going to give you a template for the outline. Okay, so by next Tuesday, you need to have an idea of your campaign, so what you want to focus on, so the issue and the solution, and then we are going to develop your strategies. And in week 9, hopefully you will have more of an idea on how you're going to kind of achieve your objectives, so how you're going to kind of make this solution work, and how you're going to implement this into your social media strategy. Right, guys. So now it is up to you to start kind of doing the first step towards this. And now you need to set up your MailChimp and Twitter accounts, okay? So they are both free. So on Blackboard, I included a link to MailChimp, but if you just go to Google MailChimp sign up, it comes up straight away. And the same, I'm sure that you know how to access Twitter. So yes, Maria.
Lucy, I've got a question. Like, how
Yeah.
am I supposed to set up my MailChimp and Twitter account? Because, for example, I don't have either of them. So I was thinking I could put like my username or something based on the cause I want to focus it on. So I don't really know what I want to focus it on yet. So I don't really know how would I open like a Twitter or like MailChimp account. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can change them later. You can change your username on Twitter at any time.
Even like
So
the
it
ad.
needs, sorry?
Even like the ad. So like my actual name. So like I know you've got the ad, which is like basically what people Google you or like search
Yeah.
for you. You can change
Yeah.
everything.
No, you can. You can.
Oh, okay, because I've never used Twitter, so I
Yeah.
just don't know.
No, I have changed mine several times. It should be possible, but if it's not, if you really can't do it, then just let me know, and that's completely fine. Okay. Okay. Again, so for MailChimp, you will need to use an email, and for Twitter as well. Don't worry too much about the names. You can change it in both of them, but don't worry about the names too much. It's important that you kind of name your campaign something, something relevant, and then you use all the messages and hashtags that I'm not going to, check on what your Twitter username was, or what your MailChimp email was, or whatever. Okay, so these are not important things. So I hope this helps. As I said, if you go into week 7 reading list, there are 3. There is one book. There is this kind of guide on how to do public advocacy campaign, and there is also a text about public advocacy. What I want to stress for the one last time, it's completely up to you, Lauren, as you want, whichever you think would be better for you. Okay, so what I wanted to say is that what we are doing here really is we are creating a part of communication strategy for a campaign. But why I actually went on to explaining all of these elements of public advocacy and what public advocacy is that you will need to have this in mind, this broader context of your campaign, and this kind of other strategies that would, link to your communication strategy. So because you can't just come up with communication plan and with tactics and with social media messages and posts when you actually don't have outline, when you haven't outlined the rest of your campaign and what it is going to be. So these points on this slide are the most important that you should kind of focus on, that you should have in mind. Okay, so of course what you are executing is the communication, the effective communication that you are doing via social media, but you need to have background information for this. You need to have objectives. You need to have you need to kind of identify if you're going to partner with someone or not. Political landscape depends how political your cause would be. Okay, but even if we think about political landscape, you can talk about possible sponsors or detractors to your campaign, and then key strategies. So that means, what other strategies you would possibly employ with social media. But again, it's not an imperative that you need to list them somewhere or anything like that. It's really just here. These points are just here to provide some kind of aid, some mental aid, or how I can call it, when you are thinking about what to include in your communication campaign. And so all these things that I have mentioned on these slides, know your audience, messages, simple but inspiring. You can include events, visuals, sound bites, and then again, the best practices. These are things that should definitely you should definitely consider including as many of them as possible, and of course, so that you can create something convincing, coherent, and impactful. Okay, so is everyone happy? Can I just let you go off and do your social media accounts and play around with MailChimp and Twitter for a bit, and then next week we are going to start creating some of your first steps for the campaign. Okay? Okay, guys. Well, if you do have any questions, email me as always. Also, there is going to be a talk on Thursday. I have sent you that email with Javier Farge, who is a journalist, Peruvian-born British journalist. If you want to attend that, that's going to be Thursday morning, 10:45 until 12 p.m. You are more than welcome to join that if you have time, if you are interested. and I'm going to give you a brief and more detailed and the draft template by next week as well. So yes, we will keep in touch, and good luck with everything. Okay, thank you guys. Have a good day. Bye. Bye. Thank you too. Bye bye.